Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulihil Kareem. Nabiyyina wa habibina wa shafi'ina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilma. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا فيسر لنا أمورنا واختم لنا بالسعادة إنك على كل شيء قدير. أما بعد. So, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, it's an honor and a pleasure to be able to speak to you all today. I know most of you are in Malaysia, so it's around 9:50 p.m. Also apologize for any delays. It's around 7:50 a.m. here in Texas, inshallah. So please bear with me. And I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow this to be beneficial. And I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow me to answer your questions correctly. Not that I'm any qualified to do so, but I will try my best. Inshallah, there's so many other more qualified people out there in the world, and even in Malaysia, mashallah, so many students of knowledge over there, so many scholars, mashallah. So let's get started, shall we? Inshallah. Okay, so the first question that I'm getting is what are the ibadat that women can do during their menses, right? During their period or their menstrual cycle. And women do have this question a lot because I think the main thing is because in Islam we have salah, and that's like our main form of worship, right? Salah is the second pillar of Islam. It's what we do. It's what we were made to do. It's what we were created to do, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives women permission. He gives them a rukhsa, an allowance to not pray during this time because they're in a weakened state. This is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other cultures see it, or other religions even see it, as them being impure. And there's so many cultures and other places around the world, they handle it so poorly. I've heard of things, instances where women are made to go to like an outhouse, like there's a separate hut or shack outside of the home where they have to stay during this time because they're not supposed to be in the home because they're seen as like dirty and unclean. So these things, it's not true. Even when a woman is haid or on her menses, it's a different type of impurity. It's not the same type of impurity that we see in other instances in Islam or in our lives. And it's something that happens cyclically, like it's a cycle for women, right? It's supposed to happen like every 4 weeks. But this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and from his mercy he allows women to not have to pray during this time, and they don't have to make it up later either. So what can they do? They can do pretty much everything else, right? I think one of the sub questions to this question was like, can they wake up and pray qiyam? Like the answer is no. The short answer is no. They cannot, because you can't pray, right? And scholars also say that because they're in that short state of impurity, or a temporary state of impurity, they shouldn't touch the Quran either. A lot of scholars, especially scholars today, they'll say that if there's like a barrier between you and the Quran, like if you're wearing gloves or if you're holding it with like a cloth, then they say it's okay. I know Malaysia's majority Shafi'i country. Shafis are actually pretty strict on this. They say that you can't touch the Quran. You can't even recite the Quran. A lot of scholars do say that you cannot recite the Quran either, um, unless it's part of your dhikr. And I think one of the questions is if they can do like their ma'thurat, like their, like their daily dhikr. And yes, this is possible as long as it's not the intention that you're reciting Quran, right? People recite the Quran kind of like as another act of ibadah. So if you're reciting the Quran, saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir rahmanir rahim, Qul huwallahu ahad, that's not allowed. Scholars say that's not allowed. But if you're doing your dhikr and you're doing your ma'thurat, and you're just saying like Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar, this is in the Quran, but you're not actually reciting the Quran, right? If you're reciting ayatul kursi, for protection, it's from the Quran, but you're not reciting it, you're with the intention of reciting the Quran, right? So scholars do allow this. And then there's everything else that you can do. You can give charity. Of course, you can't fast, but you can give charity. You can go and try and benefit people. You can go and try and seek knowledge. Right? All of these things are still allowed. A lot of contemporary scholars mention that you can read books of tafsir, because when you pick up a book of tafsir, its purpose is not as a mushaf to read the Quran. Its purpose is to explain ayat of the Quran. So some scholars even go that far and say that you can even do that. You can read hadith, you can read the seerah. So all of these are considered acts of ibadah as well, if your intention is correct and you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us all of our ibadah and allow us to increase in it, inshallah. So maybe we can move on to the next question, inshallah. Oh, this was an interesting one. So this person is asking if what is the aura between two people, right? So the aura between two people, for men and women, majority of scholars agree that it's the same, right? So between two men, it's from the navel or the belly button to the knees. For the women, between two women, it's the same, between the belly button and the knees. Of course, between men and women, it's different. And between husband and wife, there's no aura. Okay? And what is the aura between Muslim girls who live together? So it would be the same from the belly button to the knees. Okay. Of course, observing modesty in front of others is advisable. It's better. And sorry, excuse me, 1 second, please. Okay, so of course it's advisable to observe haya or modesty in front of others, even our own family members. It's not good to be so comfortable that you're just walking around only covering your belly button to your knees, right? Men or women. So it's advisable. Other scholars do say that if it's a girl and it's her mahram, then whatever is washed during wudu is the only part that's allowed to be open. So that's so everything that is not washed during wudu is considered aura. So like between father and daughter, or son and mother. So like I said, it's better that we just try to cover ourselves in general. And there's a follow-up question to this, because I'm assuming this is coming from the hadith that I'm trying to think of the Arabic. It's a hadith by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. He says, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا ينظر الرجل إلى عورة رجل ولا المرأة إلى عورة المرأة ولا يفضي الرجل إلى رجل في ثوب واحد ولا تفضي المرأة إلى مرأة في ثوب واحد. Right? This means that one man should not look at the aura of another man, and a woman should not look at the aura of another woman, and they should not share a cover. Right? They should not. They should basically saying that if you're going to sleep and you're sharing a bed, or you're sharing a blanket or a bed sheet or a pillow or any of these things, there should be some type of barrier in between, right? So it's better to not share a blanket or a cover or a pillow or even a bed if possible, right? And if you absolutely have to for whatever reason, then you should make sure that your aura is properly covered, and you should cover as much as you can. So the short answer is that yes, you are not allowed to share the same cover if your aura is not properly covered. If it is, you can, but it's advisable not to. Right? This is more something out of necessity. Right? This isn't like the normal. This isn't like a normal situation where it's like, okay, hey, like it's allowed as long as we're properly covered. Let's only have one bed to share. Right? So yes, just to summarize, the aura between man and another man, and likewise for a woman to another woman, is from the navel to the knees. This is what majority of the scholars agree upon. And if your aura is not properly covered, you cannot share the same blanket, you cannot share the same cover. Also, we know that sleeping separately is advised because of the other famous hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that you advise your children to pray, and then by the age of 10 you are to discipline them if they do not pray, and also you have to make arrangements for them to sleep in a separate bed. So even if your own child, right, is advised to sleep in a separate bed by the age of 10, then what about two full-grown adults, right? So we have to take these things into consideration, inshallah. Okay, next question. Why do we need to say inshallah after a promise or anything else in life? Okay, bismillah. There's nothing saying that we need to or we have to, but we do have to acknowledge that everything happens by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? What does inshallah mean? It means if Allah wills. If Allah wants it to happen, it'll happen. Some people say inshallah, some people say bi'idhnillah, right? And on the flip side, when something does happen, people say qadar Allah, right? This happened by the decree of Allah. If so that we don't try to ponder and question too much as to why something happened. Right? It's the will of Allah. This is all the will of Allah. So if you do want something to happen and you acknowledge that it'll only happen if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to, it's more of a reminder to ourselves that, look, there's no guarantee it's going to happen, right? Even if I were to say that, let me go get a glass of water, there's no guarantee that's going to happen, right? Unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to happen. So we don't, nowadays, people call it the Muslim inshallah, right? Where you say inshallah, meaning that it's never gonna happen, right? You're like, oh, are you coming today? Inshallah. Like, no, you're not really coming. I'm not really going, right? Even I think this was made pretty famous when during the presidential debate, when Joe Biden said inshallah, trying to basically say that Trump was not going to keep his promises. So this is something that we do need to work on. It's not good. It's definitely not good that even non-Muslims are starting to learn that when a Muslim says inshallah, they usually mean that they're actually not going to do it. It usually means no instead of yes. So It's not like I said, this isn't anything that we have to do, like, oh, in order for Muslims, it's wajib for us to say inshallah after we make a promise. Like, no, this is just an acknowledgement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a form of dhikr, because it's a remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we really do have to be mindful every time we say it. Sometimes it just becomes habit, where it's like, okay, I'm going to do this, inshallah, or we text it out, and it just becomes a habit, and we start to lose the real meaning and purpose to why we're saying it, right? And also, if you want to think that there's more of a chance of it happening if it's something you do want to happen or you don't want to happen, um, if you say inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sees that we're acknowledging him and that we have awareness of him, and hopefully that's a sign towards our taqwa. So we would like to hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make it more likely for whatever it is we're saying it for to happen or not to happen, the likelihood of that going up, inshallah. Right? So Wallahu alam. But we should say inshallah mindfully, right? Not just out of habit or just rolling off the tongue, or mindlessly. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so the next question, excuse me, Sheikh, I have a question while reciting the Quran. Is it wrong to just simply stop in the middle of an ayah because I'm out of breath and just continue back from where I stopped? Okay, so one thing I would like to say is that in the Quran, all of the stops, and even like the ayat themselves, this can turn into a really long discussion, so I'm hoping to avoid going too deep into this. But all of the stops, when you look in the Quran, you'll see like a small jim or a ta, or sad lam ya, or qaf lam ya. The more the Persian print Qurans that you'll see, like the Indo-Pak, the Indians and the South Asians reading from, they'll even have more signs like a qaf and lam alif, and even in the regular mushaf you'll see lam alif and meme as well. These are all ijtihadi, right? These are all made out of deduction, right? Scholars, they put them themselves. It's not like the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ said that, okay, and then over here is a stop. No. So we know, and even the ayat, if you look in different qira'at, in different riwayat, right, you'll see that in one place there may be an ayah, but in a different qira'ah, the ayah does not end there. It'll end somewhere else, right? So this is something that we have to keep in mind. So when you're stopping, you really, and this is why I always emphasize that as Muslims we really do need to we need to learn Arabic, at least to the extent where we understand what's being said or read, right? We don't have to be able to speak Arabic perfectly, but we should be able to at least understand what's being said, because the Quran is in Arabic and reading the translation doesn't do it justice, right? The hadith and the sunnah are in Arabic, and we should be able to at least understand or comprehend, maybe 70% of what is being said. So when you're reading the Quran and you need to stop, right, there's nothing against just stopping. For instance, early on when we're memorizing the Quran, we usually start from Juz Amma, right? And if we and then the first like long surah we get to, or difficult surah, is probably Surah Bayyina, right? And the first ayah is actually pretty long, right? لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين حتى تأتيهم البينة. And if you were to read it properly with tajweed and do all the muds and the gunnas and everything, it's difficult, especially for kids, to read it in one breath. So for instance, if you were to say لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين, we tell them, like, maybe you should stop there, munfakin or wal mushrikeen, okay? والمشركين. If you were to stop at والمشركين, just starting off and saying munfakina again, you have to think about the meaning, right? When you stop, it usually makes a person think that, okay, it's maybe it's a ayah, or it's a stop or something like this. But no, you have to think about the meaning. So it's better to just go back to a place where the meaning makes sense. وَالْمُشْرِكِينَ مُنْفَكِّينَ حَتَّى تَأْتِيَهُمُ الْبَيِّنَةُ. Right? Like that. So when you're reciting the Quran and you need to stop because you're running out of breath, just try and go back to a spot where you feel like it would make sense, meaning wise. And even in the Mus'haf, no ayah I feel like is too long. I mean, some people have shortness of breath or do not have the lung capacity, but average wise, I feel like a stop comes in the Mus'haf every so often, to where you don't run out of breath. But for the places that do, you really have to figure out where a proper place to stop is. And this is why it's also important to have a Quran teacher, somebody who's experienced and knows and understands, at least meaning wise, like where's a good place to start and stop. And even if you're an adult and you don't have much experience, it's always advisable to stick with the teacher, at least to a point where you become fluent yourself and can recite properly yourself without having to think too much about these things. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. How do we recite Al-Fatiha in jama'ah? So reciting Surah Fatiha in the prayer is it's very important, right? There's the hadith that there's no prayer except with the recitation of Al-Fatiha. So if you do not recite Surah Al-Fatiha in Salah, your prayer is not valid. So there's so many sub topics about this, and one of them is if you're not the imam, if you're praying in jama'ah and you're the ma'mum, or you're the one who is being led, what do you do? What are you supposed to do? Right? And there's different opinions on this. And like I said, because I'm going to assume majority of the audience is in Malaysia, which is majority Shafi'i country, the Shafi'is say that you also have to still recite Surah Al-Fatiha, right? But of course, you're not going to recite it out loud with the imam. You're going to recite it in your heart, or quietly. And if you want to follow along with the imam, like if they're saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and you're just following along and you're reciting it in your head along with the imam, that's fine. But the other opinions are that for the quiet rak'ahs, so for instance, Dhuhr, Asr, the last rak'ah of Maghrib, the last two rak'ahs of Isha, you read it yourself. And for the rak'ahs that are recited out loud by the imam, so Fajr and the first two rak'ahs of Maghrib and the first two rak'ahs of Isha, you do not have to recite it with the imam or recite it at all, right? You can just listen or not listen, but then where's your concentration in salah, and how good is your salah going to be if you don't listen? And then the third opinion is that you don't have to do anything at all. Loud rak'ahs, recited out loud, recited quietly. If you're praying behind the imam, then everything is on the imam. You're just following along. But like I said, the Shafi'i opinion, and also the opinion that I've seen a lot of scholars take is that you should recite Surah Fatiha in every rak'ah, even if you're not the imam, even if you're following behind an imam, you can read along, or you let's say you join the prayer after Surah Fatiha, maybe you just join the prayer and you start reciting Surah Fatiha, and then you can continue listening to the imam. Like I said, you have to do this quietly. Don't Don't just join a jama'ah and then start reciting out loud or whispering so loudly that the person next to you can hear. You also do not want to distract and disturb the other musallin. So I hope that's clear. Allah Ta'ala alam. What does khushu in prayer feel like? I don't know. Can you guys tell me what it feels like? It's I don't think there's some universal answer to this, right? Um, Khushu is something that goes hand in hand with salah. When you talk about salah, right, you ultimately begin speaking about khushu, and it's become so attached to salah itself, the concept of khushu, that people don't even really translate it anymore, right? When you talk about khushu, it's like you already know what they mean by it. But khushu, um, usually people translate it as tranquility or peacefulness in prayer, right? There's no way to really just describe what it feels like. The only way I can just give sort of abstract ideas of what it should feel like, and I don't think one person's khushu is um the same as another's, right? Everybody feels differently, but I guess if you find yourself really being able to concentrate in your prayer, where whatever's going on outside has no effect on you, then I would say that's the best way to explain it. I'm sure you've heard the famous story of the companion, I believe it was Ali radiallahu an, who had an arrow lodged into, like, back then during wartime, if they were struck with an arrow, you can't just pull it out, right? How is an arrow shaped? The arrowhead is shaped like this, right? I don't know if you can see it. The arrowhead is shaped like this. And the reason they do that is because it's not a perfect triangle, right? It's shaped more like this. The reason is they do that is because once it enters the body, right, once it goes in, if you were to pull it out, then those 2 points that are sticking like this, right? The 2 points that are sticking like this, if you were to pull it out, then these 2 points would start to tear out the flesh. So I'm sorry for that graphic image, but that's the reality of it. So when they would get struck by an arrow, you just snap it off. And I'm sure, I don't know if you guys are like Ertugrul fans, I'm sure you saw plenty of that, right? You get struck by an arrow, just snap it off, and then you'd have to do like a little surgery to get it out. So like I said, I believe it was Ali radiallahu an. He had like an arrow lodged like in his thigh or his hip or something like that. And of course, back then there was no anesthesia, there's no way to numb it. The modern medicine wasn't that advanced, at least in Arabia. And what did he do? He went and prayed 2 rakahs, and because his concentration was so intense in his salah, while he was praying 2 rakahs, they went in and they dug out the arrow, and he didn't flinch or really feel a thing, right? And I don't want to say it's like a trance or anything like that. I just see it as like intense concentration, and it's not like an intense concentration that causes stress or causes anxiety, right? Sometimes when we really try to focus and concentrate on something, it can tend to get a little stressful, right? Salah doesn't, it shouldn't be like this, right? And if you're able to intensely concentrate and focus while feeling peace and tranquility and serenity, then I would say that this is kind of what khushu should feel like. And of course, this is a whole nother topic that you can talk about. How do we gain khushu in our prayer? But if you really just want to know what it feels like, I personally think that it's when you're able to pray peacefully and you're able to focus entirely on your prayer and not anything else, and you don't have any outside thoughts distracting you, and you're able to not rush through your prayer thinking that, oh, I have to get to something else, and that you're just wholeheartedly focused on standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worshiping him and praying to him. And of course we need to know what we're saying in the salah in order for us to even take a step towards obtaining khusyu in our prayer. Allah ta'ala alam. Okay. Yeah, this was a good question. So assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. I have a question. Does dua qunut, so the qunut, is sunnah to do in subh, or meaning fajr, the fajr prayer, or witr? Okay. This is another area where there's a difference of opinion, especially between the four madhabs. Each madhab has a different opinion. I'll explain the Shafi opinion. Also because I'm also, I also follow the Shafi madhab, so it works out. So I'll start with witr, okay, because majority of the scholars, they first talk about doing qunut in witr. Okay. Excuse me 1 second. Mute. There we go. Okay, so in witr, you do the qunut in the last rak'ah, in the third rak'ah. Okay. Do you do it before the ruku, after the ruku? That's difference of opinion. So what do the Shafi'is say? They say that qunut in witr is sunnah only in the last half of Ramadan. Otherwise, if you do it, you can do it. Or if you don't do qunut in witr, you don't do qunut in witr. Okay. So only in the last half of Ramadan, according to the Shafi'is, is qunut sunnah in your witr prayer. And then for fajr, doing qunut, it's mustahab to do qunut. It's recommended to do qunut, right, during fajr prayer, especially if it's for something that's going on, like you're making dua specifically for something that's going on at the moment, right? Especially if it's for a nazila, right? It's recommended that you do qunut in fajr or subh, right? That's another name for fajr. The other some scholars don't mention doing qunut in fajr. I believe the Malikis don't even mention doing qunut in witr at all. For Hanafis, it's wajib to do qunut in witr, right? So, like I said, there's many different opinions, but for the Shafis, for fajr, yes, or subh, yes, it is sunnah, or it's mustahab. For witr, only in the last half of Ramadan. Only in the last half of Ramadan. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Okay, is there any more questions? There we go. This was this made me giggle a little bit, but okay, so you love cats, but your grandmother keeps basically abusing the cats because she doesn't like them. Is it haram to take care of cats even if my grandmother doesn't like it? Okay, so imagine if it wasn't your grandparents and your own parents, like your mother and father, right? We have to treat our grandparents, we have to see them as like our own mother and father as well, right? Because if we're supposed to love and respect our parents the most after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger, what about their parents, right? What about their parents? So it's because they're just, it's like by extension, right? you have to respect and love your grandparents, as well, to at least try and love them to that level as well. So it's not haram to take care of cats, right? It's actually, the Prophet ﷺ was very merciful towards cats. Um, if your grandmother doesn't like them, then you have to maybe try and figure something out. If you really still want to take care of cats, if you love cats and love taking care of them, maybe just try keeping them in your room, or just try keeping them outside, or have a special place for them, to where maybe your grandmother, they don't bother her or even come near her. Because if you think about it, you're doing a disservice to the cats by keeping them around your grandmother if she's going to beat them and abuse them, right? So if you really do love cats, it's better to keep them away from your grandmother, right? So not only is your grandmother uncomfortable or does not like the cats, so she um you know reacts aggressively towards them, but also the cats the cats are not being shown any mercy either, being around your grandmother. So you have to try and figure out, we have to try and not disrespect our parents and grandparents or go against their wishes, especially if it's something that has nothing to do with our ibadah or our iman or our Islam, right? If our parents are not commanding us or asking of us to commit shirk, right, or do something outside of Islam, or against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or his wishes or commandments, then we have to try our best to listen to them and fulfill their wishes, or not do anything that would displease them. So, like I said, this is also a conversation that maybe you can try having with your grandmother, and maybe advising her not to beat your cats, because that's also not good, right? That's not, it's sinful to abuse animals, right? Some people don't think twice about it. They'll just throw something at a dog or kick a cat, like not caring. We have to be merciful towards animals as well. There's a hadith. I actually had it written down somewhere. This is coming off the top of my head right now, but I'm pretty sure I had it somewhere. Um, yeah. So there's a hadith where the woman abused a cat, and she ended up in the hellfire. And a man, all he did was give a dog some water from a well, because there was no other water around, and all his sins were forgiven. So you see, like, there's a fine line between, not a fine line, but you can see, like, between mercy and abuse, what the consequences are. Even something as insignificant, or what we see as insignificant, as giving an animal some water, right? So we really do have to think about the pets or the cats as well, to make sure they're not being abused, and what's best for them too. So Allah ta'ala alam. Hopefully you can figure it out with your family, inshallah. Okay, so this question, it's very good and it's very important. um uh, Off from the top, the short answer is yes, it's okay. It's definitely okay. It's probably recommended that you distance yourself from negative friends, because why would you want to be around negativity like that, right? If you're around a group of people, and all they do is just say bad things, talk about bad things, um do haram things, or talk about haram things, or speak in an ill manner, or or they're just negative, right? It doesn't even have to be not even about halal and haram. They're just negative themselves. Why would you want to be around that? That's definitely not good for your psychology, for your mental and emotional well-being. It's definitely not, not good for you. And you guys probably know the famous hadith that it was reported عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الرجل على دين خليله فلينظر أحدكم من يخالل. Famous hadith that the person is on the religion of their friends, right? So forget religion like Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, whatever. Just think about, because what is a religion really supposed to do? It's supposed to be your way of life. So even if we don't even think about the Islam aspect, because let's say our friends are all Muslim anyways, then is Islam really governing their way of life? Is it really guiding their actions and their mentality and their the way they talk and the way they think? So even if your friends are all Muslim, if they're all negative, then it's not good. It's not good, right? And the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned before in the hadith that the good friend or the true friend is the one that reminds you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It was narrated from Ibn Mas'ud that radiallahu anh, that he said, وَلَا عَلَيْكَ أَلَّا تَصْحَبَ أَحَدًا إِلَّا مَنْ أَعَانَكَ عَلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. Right? This is mentioned in Shu'ab al-Iman by Imam al-Bayhaqi, that it's not upon you, it's not good for you that you take as a companion or a friend anyone except that they assist you or they help you or they remind you with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So those are the types of friends that we need to have. Those are real friends, right? Those are real friends. And those types of people, you would hope that they wouldn't be negative people, that they would be positive, because what can we say that's negative about remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Maybe the way somebody reminds you, or tries to help you remember Allah. Maybe that could be in a negative way, like maybe they're not very good at giving advice, right? But remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing negative about that. So if you have friends that remind you to pray, that, let's say you make a promise and then you don't say inshallah, but they say inshallah, right? And then you think about it like, oh yeah, like inshallah, but the real kind, not the fake kind. Or, if you're about to do something bad and they try and stop you and they give you sincere advice, right? Sincere advice. That's the way. That's the way to have to be a true friend and to find true friends. And basically there's another famous hadith that talks about good company and bad company, right? Good company are people whose company you enjoy, that remind you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they don't talk bad, they're not negative, they only think and do good things, at least in the presence of their friends. And the hadith is narrated by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu an, عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So on the authority of Abu Musa, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, إنما مثل الجليس الصالح والجليس السوء كحامل المسك ونافخ الكير. Right? So there's an example given of good company and bad company. And good company is compared to the person who sells perfume, and bad company is compared to the person who's a blacksmith, right? He works with fire and iron, and they're dirty all the time because it's a dirty job, and their clothes are dirty and their face is covered in like soot and black stuff, right? فحامل المسك إما أن يحذيك وإما أن تبتاع من وإما أن تجد منه ريحا طيبة. So the person who sells perfume, if you're around them, what's gonna happen? Um, so either, like you'll see the perfume and they'll sell it to you, and at the very least you'll find a good smell from them, right? If you walk into any like perfume store, it's gonna smell nice, right? It's going to smell nice. ونافخ الكير إما أن يحرق ثيابك وإما أن تجد ريحا خبيثة. So the blacksmith, if you hang out with the blacksmith, what's gonna happen? Either you're gonna get burned, right? Either your clothes are gonna get burned or something. Maybe you got too close to the fire, or some hot, or fell on you or something, or you're gonna find a bad smell, right? Things burning don't always smell that good, unless you get it from the perfume seller, right? If it's like some oud or some incense or something. But these other things, the burning metal or whatever it is that they're doing, I'm assuming that blacksmith, their place of work does not smell good, and you risk getting burned yourself. And this hadith is narrated in Muslim and Bukhari. So we have to try and find good company for ourselves, so that we don't get burned, so that we don't come out with a bad smell by association, so that we are upon the religion of our friends, hoping that it to be like true Islam, and so that we can not turn on each other on the day of judgment, right? Because it says in the Quran in Surah Al-Zukhruf, al-akhillau yawma idhin ba'duhum li ba'din aduwwun illa al-muttaqin, that friends on that day will turn into enemies, right? We're going to turn on each other on the day of judgment, because everybody's only going to be concerned about themselves, right? They're all going to be saying nafsi nafsi, except who? The muttaqin, right? Those who are pious, who are God conscious. So we need to try and find friends like that and be like that ourselves, right? You don't want to just surround yourself with these good people, right? And you're the one, right, black sheep, or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call it, right? You don't want to be the odd one out, where it's like everybody else around you is good, but then you're the negative one, or you're the one, like doing bad things. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to find good friends, positive friends, and also be a good friend and a positive friend, inshallah. Is setting a standard towards someone we want to marry and socialize with called judging? Okay, so I'm having some trouble understanding the question. Setting a standard towards someone we want to marry and socialize with called judging. So is it setting a standard towards someone you want to marry, and like that's one question, and setting a standard towards people you want to socialize with, another question? Okay. Okay, of course in marriage you want to set standards. You should also outline expectations from the beginning, so that there's of course in a healthy way. You don't want to just go up to a person and hand them a list and be like, this is how it's going to be, or else the person's going to run away. So it's important to set standards. It's important to set expectations. It's important to try and find areas where you can what's it called? Why am I forgetting the word? Maybe because it's too early. What's it called when, right, marriage is about like sacrifice, and why am I forgetting the words? SubhanAllah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. But seeing where like you can give and take, right? You want to make sure that you can right, you don't want to just be like, it has to be like this, it has to be like this. Yes, compromise. Thank you so much. Why, I don't know why I just forgot that word. SubhanAllah. Compromise. Whenever you talk about marriage is full of compromise. And it's one of the most important things to keep in mind with marriage. And subhanAllah, I forgot the exact word. um I'm hoping that I'm compromising enough then if I forgot about the word. Khair, inshallah. Compromise, right? You have there, it's not just about you setting your own standards. You also have to be able to respect their standards as well. So you have to find that middle ground. And you also have to figure out where you can compromise, where they can compromise, because you don't want it to just be all give and no take, right? You don't want it to just be one-sided, right? And this is marriage. And whenever there's any question about marriage, get into all these tangents and side topics, and then a Q&A session just becomes an entire lecture about marriage. So I want to avoid that. But it is important to set some standards, but you have to do it with some wisdom, right? You have to do it to where it's more of a conversation between two consenting adults, and not just treating the other person like your slave or a child or your servant, and just being like, this is how it's going to be. I'm not going to budge. Take it or leave it, right? It shouldn't be like that. There should be more wisdom and thought behind things like that, especially with marriage. Now, people you want to socialize with, like friends, of course, you should have certain standards for yourself and certain standards for your friend or your friends, but they should be um they should make sense, right? They should be logical. Um they should be to a point where it's not something that's crazy to expect of others, right? You shouldn't have standards with your friends where it's like, okay, um the moment I text you, you have to text back right away. If you don't text back right away, we're not friends anymore, right? That's ridiculous. Right? You should have standards that make sense, that people can actually uphold, um just naturally, not even for your sake, right? So you should find people that have those types of qualities that meet your standards, and not try to, right, instill them in others if it's not there, or not try to beat it into them by being like, hey, you should be like this, right? It's not necessarily judging. I wouldn't call it judging, because, right, when you just think about it on the surface, judging someone is just that you the way we use it socially is that you just, whatever you see on the outside, or you get some little bit of information, and then you just make this idea in your head of that person or situation, and you think that this is the reality of it, right? That socially, I feel like that's what we think of as judging, right? Like, whether you judge somebody's character, or you're judging somebody's outward appearance, or even if you're judging, like, um oh, I said character, but like you're judging like somebody's intentions or whatever. A lot of these things, we don't really know what's really going on with that person, so how can we even say anything about that? So I wouldn't say that's trying to set standards with people would be called judging. But like I said, if you're trying to, throw your standards and your ideas and your basically outlook on other people, then that becomes very suffocating for other people. You shouldn't expect that from other people. You should just try to find people that already have those qualities, or at least some of those qualities, and figure out yourself what ideals or what standards that you can kind of be flexible on, or even let go altogether if it's not healthy, or if it's not something that you can honestly expect others to uphold, right? So I hope I understood the question properly, and I answered to the best of my ability. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Okay, so yes, jazakumullah khairan. Whatever I said that was correct is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any mistakes I made or any misinformation I may have given, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me, because that's from my own weakness and from shaitan. I hope that whatever you have heard has benefited you and myself. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us and have mercy upon us, and allow us to continue to gain beneficial knowledge and to learn from it and benefit from it and spread it to others. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allow us to be safe and healthy, and our families to be safe and healthy, and to have mercy upon all of those around the world, all of those who are sick, all of those who have passed away, cure those who are sick and suffering, and to make it easy upon them, and to help the Muslims around the world who are facing innumerable injustices against them, and to allow them to be safe and inshallah and to be free. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free our brothers and sisters that are under oppression around the world. أقول ما تسمعون وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. إن الله اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليه. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Once again, I thank you all. Please keep me and my family in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.